Corrosion can attack metal objects in your collection following any water-related emergency, but it doesn't take a major disaster for it to appear.
Corrosion can happen under conditions of high relative humidity because what's happening is moisture in the air is actually condensing on the surface of the object into liquid water, which causes corrosion.
Most times, corrosion is seen on the surface, orange to red-brown in color. But when active, and depending on the metal, it can also be white, green, gray, or brownish black. Corroding metals don't normally pose a health hazard, but after a disaster, protect yourself anyway. Begin by wearing rugged clothing that you don't mind getting dirt or rust stains on. Add gloves to protect your hands and skin from any chemical deposits, and safety glasses to protect your eyes from splashes. Also, keep in mind there's one case where a corroding metal could be harmful: objects with high lead content. In this situation, you should wear a NIOSH-approved respirator for lead.
If you have a military collection, you might have mini balls or bullets. Some decorative arts objects are made out of pot metal, which has a high lead content. And when lead corrodes, it's a very whiskery white corrosion product, and it is hazardous to your health. So you need to wear gloves, a mask, and some sort of clothing protection when handling corroding lead.
Your goal with wet metal objects is getting them dry. You also want to prevent them from staining nearby objects or materials. So first, isolate the wet metal pieces and, if possible, move them out of any damp or humid areas. If you see signs of corrosion, identify the metal objects made of iron, because those react most severely to being wet.
When iron corrodes, it expands in size and it pops itself apart. It can damage nearby materials if it's a composite object. Whereas all of the other metals generally corrode into a volume that's about the same size as the original object. So you want to figure out which objects are iron and which objects are not. And the best way to do that is to use a magnet, because iron is magnetic and none of the other metals are.
For objects submerged in or exposed to fresh water, use towels or other blotting materials to dry them. You can also put them in a place with good air circulation, or even out in direct sunlight. If the objects were in salt or brackish water, there's another step before drying.
If they've come out of salt water or brackish water or mud, you need to rinse them first because you don't want to leave those deposits on the surface. Salt water causes corrosion to accelerate on metal objects, and as long as there are salts there, they're going to make it corrode even more than just plain water would. So you want to rinse them in as clean a water as you can get, and then dry them as quickly as you can.
For air drying, you need plenty of room and good air circulation. Be sure to set the objects on absorbent materials and turn them over at least once while drying. Once they have begun drying, don't be afraid to speed the process along.
If you don't feel like they're drying quickly enough, just with air drying or even with a towel, you can use a hair dryer on the surface to dry them more quickly and more thoroughly, because that will also dry the interior of the object. You want to make sure you don't leave water in the cavities of the object also.
Use a hair dryer only on objects that are all metal, and then on a low or no heat setting. Metal objects that have a finish require special care when wet. Avoid rinsing these unless they've been exposed to salt water.
You just need to be very careful when you're rinsing and drying that you're not knocking paint or finish off. And then those are the objects I would probably not use a hair dryer to dry.
Composite objects with metal parts, like textiles with metal snaps, are susceptible to corrosion when wet. But you'll want to give immediate attention to any objects with iron parts.
That's really a high priority object, because it's likely that the iron portions could damage the rest of the object. What you want to try to do with the metal parts is dry them as soon as you can, and if you can isolate them, that can help. For example, if you have, say, a canvas with metal rivets on it, don't leave the wet metal rivets up against wet textile. Try to put some Mylar or even, like a cut-up Ziploc bag on either side of it so that the metal isn't up against a wet organic material, because it will corrode and cause staining on the textile portions.
Following an emergency, Many typical corrosion removal or cleaning products should not be used. For example, ammonia may cause more corrosion because of its high pH. It's also important to keep metal objects in a low humidity environment, ideally below 55%, and as a rule, avoid taking any salvage measures unless you're certain they won't further damage the object. Your role in dealing with corrosion is to help stabilize the situation, not treat the corrosion yourself. That's a job for a conservator.